This one's come out of scrapyard. We've got no keys. We'll jerry-rig a little fuel tank up. I don't think that's drawing any fuel up. Perhaps we ain't got a spark. Okay, perhaps we've got wet plugs. I'm not going to fret about this. It doesn't smell very nice. I'll get that out with a rag, whatever that is. Oh no, look, what's all this? Oh, that killed it. Just try again. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll know I love these little Fiat 600s, don't I? So here's another one, another one to work on. So this one's from, well, it come out of scrapyard, up country, and it was written off because it water damaged the interior. Now, we think it's been in a flood, but we don't really know. Don't really know what's happened, why it's written off, but because we think it's been in a flood, we're going to have to do some bits to get it going. So, you know, want to change the oil, see if there's any water in the oil to start with. That'll give us a clue of what's going on, and then we'll work from there. But we want to change the oil anyway before we start running it up. We don't know when it's last run. So we're going to go through a process of starting out and will it run type video, because it hasn't run, as far as we know, it isn't running. It came with no keys, so we're going to have to hotwire it. But anyway, that's that. So I need to get it up off the ground a bit so we can see what we're doing. And yeah, that's the start. I need a jack. Let's get on with it. So the old negative camber on the wheels, that's why they flop over when they get into a bit of trouble. It's so tuck under when they, yeah, you're going to have a little bit of trouble with these sometimes. They can be unstable in the wrong situation. Right, there we are, we're up on some stands. Got a bit of a wobble on it, I think we'll be all right. Right, so first things first, we wanted to get the oil out of it, don't we? Now, normally you do an oil change with the warm engine. Obviously this is stone cold because it's been outside for a while. We'll have the oil filler cap off. Now, this is quite a nice little original car actually, scrapyards apart. It's actually quite a nice one. Now, they've got the proper little Oilio Fiat cap, you know, the original one. You know, things like that's quite nice, isn't it? Modern fuel filter put on there, a Marla one. That's not a bad thing. So that's been replaced. Looks like they've had a new fuel pump at some point. Water pump's been replaced at some point. So it's had some stuff done. These aren't quite right. These are modern leads, but they'll be right. We've got a slightly loose distributor. I don't think it'll matter, not for this. I think it'll be all right. And yeah, someone's replaced the coil. So it's high hopes for it. I reckon it'll work. I reckon we'll do something. Start with this oil, see what we've got. Now I'll pull the door up because it's getting cold, isn't it? Right, now the theory is that the hasn't run for a long time. And if it's been in a flood and got any water ingress into it, the water will go to the bottom. And because it hasn't been run, it won't have sort of churned up in the oil or you know, gone sort of, the oil tends to go milky if it's got moisture in it, but obviously after a while it will settle. And so what we're expecting is that the water will be all right at the bottom of the sump, and of course the drain plug is right at the bottom of the sump. So we're going to take that out and be very, very careful with it to take it out, just move it to one side a little bit and see if we can get any water to come out before the oil comes out. So I'm going to use this little bowl, this little white bowl to start with, and then we'll use the proper oil drainer. If it just starts coming out as oil, we can just swap over to that. But I thought we'll just try that a little bit into there and see what we got. So let's get underneath and have a look. So it's all in pretty good shape under here. It's very tidy, isn't it? So this is our oil drainer. It's 17 mil, and I'll just put a spanner on there, back to back, to give a bit of leverage. Right, these are on a taper, so they've not got a washer on them, they're sort of tapered thread. So, let's see what we've got. There. What I'm going to do is get it off of the threads, see what we got. That looks like oil to me. It looks in reasonable condition as well. Right. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Look. That's just oil. There's no water in there. So, if there'd been water in there, I would expect to see it come out first of all, wouldn't we? Before we did it. I'll drain a bit more out and then we can go into the big bowl, can't it? But I think that hasn't got any water in it. So I'm not so sure about all this being in the water thing. Oh no, look, what's all this? Do you see that? There's something nasty then, wasn't there? Like a lump of something. That's ominous, isn't it? So maybe it has had some water in it. That sort of congealed stuff might be where it's contaminated it. Do you see what I mean? Might be. Don't know. That was a bit weird, wasn't it? Yes, not sure what to make of that one. We'll have to think about that in a minute. Well, I think if we let this drain into there, then we can sort of see. Now I'm going to let this sort of tip into there. Yeah, look, you see that great big lump of stuff? Yeah, so something ain't quite right. I'm not going to worry too much about it. And maybe it did have a bit of water in it. Or maybe that was just a bit from the condensation. Now look, there's more lumps of stuff coming out here. Yeah, that slightly lumpy bit there. Now what is that? Yeah. Yeah, look, I reckon that's a bit of water. Look where it's gone there. Look, there's sort of, yeah, I reckon that was a bit of water. Maybe it was a bit of water suspended in it. I'd expect to see it separated, but it obviously hasn't. Look, you see it's all sort of lumpy here as it's coming out. There's definitely something in there, isn't there? Yeah. Yeah, look, all those sort of bits. All sort of almost mayonnaise-y, look, you know, what we sort of describe as mayonnaise-y looking stuff. Yeah, I reckon that's got something in it. Look, there comes a big lump of it. There you go. Look, now it's all coming out, look. Look at that. Look at it coming out now, look. Yeah. Now that's got water in it, hasn't it? I reckon that's where it's got water in it. So I reckon it's got suspended in the oil somehow. So my theory of it being at the bottom, it ain't worked like that, has it? I think it's sort of got into the oil itself, mixed with the oil, and it's become suspended in there. But that, I would have said, is, yeah, look at it, you see these lumps of it? I reckon that is all where water's got suspended in it. It's taken a long time to drain because it's so cold, you know, it's quite thick, the oil, you see. But, you know, we can't run the engine till I've changed this oil. Now, what I'm proposing to do is change the oil, run it up initially to get it hot, and then change it again and change the filter and remove the centrifuge off the back of the crankshaft and clean that up. So that's what I'm going to do, but I won't waste a good oil filter on it at the minute. We'll save that for when we've done it. Right, we're going to leave that draining for a bit. That's going to take a little while to drain, isn't it? Let's leave that draining well for a bit, and we'll get on with something else towards what we're trying to do. Next job, get the spark plugs out. So we get our leads off, twist them a bit so they don't come apart when you undo them. Now, because it's cold, these will stay in roughly the right place, so I know which lead goes to where. So I'll twist them a little. So I won't lose the firing order, mind you, it's fairly easy to count them back up on these and time it back up again if need be. Now, because the engine's cold, they seem to be fairly tight to come out, to undo. I think they've been done up quite tight, actually. But as I say, we're working on a cold engine because we are. Right, now it'll be very easy to touch on these and arc this out, because that'll be live, but it's not. I know it's not live because I've got the battery disconnected, so I'm not worried about that. Right. Okay. We'll look at these plugs and see if there's any sort of rust on them or evidence of anything of water being in the engine itself. There's a bit of sort of build up on that one, isn't there, of something, like the damp's got at it. But that might just where it's just sat around, not necessarily that it's been in water. What we do is if we wind it over with the plugs out, and if there's any water in there, it will shoot out the plug holes, won't it? But yeah, that one's a lot cleaner, isn't it? Look at that. It's got a bit more corrosion on it, isn't it? But not enough to say that, that's full of water. I don't think we've got water in the bores. Oh, I can see the top of that piston, actually. Let's see if I can get a piston up. Yes, I can see the top of the piston. Cool. I think this has been rebuilt, this engine, like very recently. I think it's a brand new engine. Like, that's very shiny, the top of that piston. And what that says to me is that that's just been rebuilt, this engine, recently, which is what we sort of thought. But you have the top of that piston, you can still see some of the aluminium, the shiny aluminium, and only a bit of black from the carbon that's built up on it. So I think this is a brand new engine. I reckon that's been rebuilt very, very recently. Or, we don't know what they've done when they rebuilt it, but that's certainly, in extremely clean and good condition. So that bodes well. Now I'm going to have a look down the others and see if I can see any sort of signs of nastiness and corrosion or whatever. Yeah, it looks good. Really does look very good. Right, so that's one little job. How's this oil draining? And we can see it's sort of discoloured, this last bit. We see how that's discoloured in the bowl. That last lot that's coming out, you see. It's sort of, don't know really what that is. It might be a residue of, it might be some of the old stuff in there's floated to the top, or it might be that this is slightly discoloured. This last lot has got, maybe this last lot's the more contaminated with water. I don't know. You're going to have iffy petrol, aren't we? So shall we have a look at that under the bonnet and see what we got? So let's open up the door. Now the check strap's broken on this, which is why I can fold the door right back. So, okay. So this being the early car has a separate fuel tank. The later cars have a tank that goes across the back here. But anyway, this one has this more old-fashioned tank with the sort of seam on it like this, which is a charming thing really. So, well. It doesn't smell very nice. It doesn't look too bad. I can't see any sort of water floating about on the bottom. But I think what we'll do is, rather than mess around with that, I think we'll set up a little fuel can, a little remote fuel can, and we'll run it on that rather than run it on the fuel that's in here. And I'll take that fuel tank out and drain that out and start again. But we ain't going to do that now because I don't want to do that now. So I think what we'll do, we'll get this off here and we'll jerry-rig a little fuel tank up, and then we can then get some fuel up, some fresher fuel, I think. Right, let's get a bit of fuel hose off and then I'll dunk it in the jerry can, can't I? Should have some good fuel in there. Right, if we pop this down into here, as long as it will stay down in the bottom, then at least when we start cranking it over, we might draw some fuel up. I'll put some oil in it. I think this will do for what we're trying to do. We're not going to run, we're not going to drive it like this. We're just going to run it up to temperature, and then we'll change the oil again, if you see what I mean. So it won't be putting any strain on the engine, but with it nice and warm, it should bring any more of that moisture out with it. So that's that, and as I say, then we'll change filters and so on. Funnel, let's find some oil. Now I'll tell you what I'm going to do, I'm just going to find something to blank that fuel hose off with, just in case it decides to siphon out, which would be fun, wouldn't it? Right, that'll do, wouldn't it? It'll be a little bit of a slow filler, this one. Fiat's are notorious for being slow fillers. Of course, it's moving a bit slow as well because it's so cold, isn't it? So the oil's a bit treacly. It does seem a waste of nice oil, doesn't it, to just be flushing it out, but that's what it is. I'm not going to muck about. We'll use nice oil and that's it. It's a shame, but anyway, go in the heater, won't it? I can use it for that. Right, let's see if that's registering anything just yet. Alright, we're on our minimum, that's good. Have a little bit more, and then I think we'll be alright. So I'm not going to go too mad because we're not going to, minimum would do really, because obviously the minimum, you want to allow for the oil to move around in the sump, and obviously if you were on minimum driving up a hill or down a hill, whichever way, if it went away from the oil pickup, it could get aerated and pick up some air and run the bearings in the engine, which is why you want to run with not on the minimum effectively. But obviously we're on the level and we're just running it up and we're not going anywhere, so it will suffice. But I just wanted a little bit more than that, but that'll be all right. There we are, it's just up the minimum there, that'll do. I'm not going to fret about this. It's also got to drain down through the engine and the rest of it that we just put in, so I think that'll be all right. That'll be enough for what we're doing. Okay, well that's that little bit done. But what I'll do is I'll take the top of the carb off, then we can spray something down it if we feel it's relevant when we get to that point. Let's have the air filter off. Oh, there you are, look at that. Look, that's like brand new, isn't it? I think this has just been restored, this car. I don't think it's been here long in the country. I think it's been restored in Italy, come over here, and then something's happened to it. And I think it's barely turned a wheel in England and I think it was rebuilt in Italy. I think that's what's happened to this. Right, so we've got no keys. So that's the next thing we've got to look at, isn't it? What we're going to do about that. Right, here we are. So what I've done, I've taken the ignition barrel out. And the reason I've taken the ignition barrel out is so that we can try and get a key cut for it. But that's gone off with the customer to try and get a key. And there's our ignition wires. So let's see what we got. We're going to have to hot wire it, so let's see what we got. So if I turn the battery on, connect the battery up, and then we'll see what we got. And then I can see what we have to do. So I've got a test light, put it to ground there on our nice little Fiat bolts. So what have we got? So we've got live feed there, you see? So that's our permanent live. And we've got this big fat red one, and that's probably carries a fair bit of juice. So that's either ignition live, or it might be to energise the start motor, I don't know. Or this might be ignition, I don't know. Let's have a look. So what we're looking at, we're going to put these together and see what happens. So we're not in gear, we know that, but let's just check. Yeah, we're not in gear, let's just double check. Not in gear, so nothing funny is going to happen. Right, so that's the starter, that energises the starter. This is ignition. So if we look up on the dashboard, we'll see ignition lights coming on. See? Right, that's what we want, isn't it? So that gives us our ignition. And the other one is to energise the starter. So Okay, now we don't want those going to ground anywhere, touching anything and arcing out on the bodywork, but they won't, they're quite safe there, so we're all right with that. We could do with seeing if there's a spark, but we could also do with getting the engine turned over a bit and seeing if any water come out. Well, we know there's no water in there, inside on top of the pistons, inside the cylinders, because we saw them when we were looking earlier with our torch. So we know about that, so we're not worried about that. But we'd like to get a bit of oil around it first, and obviously we can crank in the engine over. We should be able to drag some more. The fuel pump should drag some fuel up into the carburettor from our can there. So I'll crank it over for a bit and see what we got. Then we'll start working out if we've got a spark or not. So I'm going to be turning the engine over just by energising the starter motor without any ignition feed. So it's not going to have any sparks or anything. It's not going to do anything. It's just going to crank over, but to get some oil around it. Okay, cranked it over a bit. Ain't too bad, is it? I reckon we'll have some oil up by now. Whether we got any petrol though is a different thing, isn't it? But I think the best thing to do here is put the plugs in. We'll spray a bit of brake cleaner down the carburettor, and with the plugs in we'll see if it'll fire up. How about that? I think we could muck around cleaning the points up and seeing if we got a spark or not, and I think the best thing to do is see if we actually have by trying it. Let's actually try it out and see what we got. Clean them up with the wire brush and then we'll put them in. This will just get the soot off them. Shouldn't make a lot of difference. I think they'll be all right anyway. Now we've got our battery connected now, so we've got to worry about whether we touch this on these, so we don't want it arcing out on there, so we've just got to be careful about it, that we don't let anything silly happen. Now I've moved the plug leads around a bit, so let's work out our firing order. Now on these, they've got it on the cap, which lead goes to where. So we've got 1, 3, 4 and 2. Now they go into this trunking, so you can't really see which end's which sort of thing, can you? So it doesn't help much, does it? But we can take it upon ourselves that these two are the rear two, and we can sort of see where they went anyway, because they were still sort of holding themselves, because it was cold, they're still holding themselves from where they were. So those two are definitely going to go there. So that just leaves us with the confusion of these two, doesn't it? Now, did they go that way, or did they go that way? So if we use a continuity tester, that'll give us an idea. Now the other thing is which cylinder's which. Now does it count from the front of the engine towards the front of the car, or the back of the engine? Does it go 1, 2, 3, 4, or does it go 1, 2, 3, 4? We don't know. But if we have a look, we can see. There it is, look, 1, 2, 3, 4. The Fiat are very helpful, they do that. And then what do you think this is? 1, 3, 4, 2. Well, that's the firing order. That's what it fires. It fires at cylinder 1, then cylinder 3, then 4, then 2. Well, that's very helpful because we know what our firing order is, and that's where the rotor arm is pointing and which cylinder it will be firing on. So anyway, that's useful. So, you know, sometimes just looking at what you're working on, they actually give you quite a bit of information, the manufacturer does anyway, on the engine, which is great, you know. Particularly for something like this that's fairly prosaic, that, you know, normal people will be working on it, maybe servicing it themselves and looking after it, you know, that's a nice thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get a continuity tester, and I can show you how that works, so we can identify which plug leads which. There, we've got a multimeter here, and we set it on the buzzer. Now what this will do is, if we've got a connection, it'll buzz. So there you go, look. So if we go up onto our distributor cap, let's pull off number 1. That's number 1 there, isn't it? Showing it next to that one adjacent to it. So if we pull that off there, and if we connect our continuity meter, well, it's not making any noise, is it? Nothing's happening there. So I suspect that's not it. Let's try this one. So we've got to get it on the actual brass connector inside, or the, well, I don't know if it's brass, but it should be. Because they're suppressed leads, it might not want to make a noise. But what we can see is, let's look at the scale. Let's not okay, let's look at the scale. So watch the scale on here. Watch when you put it towards something, it goes up. You see? It fires up and then reduces back to 0, or 0.1 there. So if the scale's going up, even if it won't actually make the buzzing noise, we can see by the scale reacting. There, it's reacting there, but it's not. It's because these leads are suppressed. because they're carbon filled. They're not. If you had the old-fashioned leads, which are the copper filled ones, that would make a noise. You'd get that making a noise. But if I put it on this one, you see it does nothing. So we know that that one is number one, this one. So there you go, right, that's that. Now someone more scientific and technical will tell you a lot more about that than that, but that's good enough for what we're doing. You don't need to know any more about it. Right, that's that. So that connected up there, so we got our number one back in. So we should, we hope, have our firing order right, shouldn't we? We should have put them all back where they came. Now you could have marked them, couldn't we? But if I'd marked them, you know, you wouldn't learn about that. But you'd learn to mark them. We should actually have a spark and might be able to fire up, but I don't think we've got much fuel up yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with spraying some brake cleaner down the carburettor and see if it will fire up on that. Just make sure it is brake cleaner and not some water or something silly. Right. Well, there you go. That might have a go at running, mightn't it? See if it's going to fire up. So we've got ignition on, and let's energise our starter motor. Nothing just yet. Right. Okay. Perhaps we ain't got a spark. Shall we test? It smells like it's trying to do something. Right, I'll pop one of these in it, see if it flashes. Right. So I'll turn that over and that should flash if it's firing. If it doesn't flash, then it's not firing. But you'll have to shout very, very loud at whatever device you're watching this on, because I can't see from here what it's doing, can I?
No, it's not flashing.
Right. Okay. So, if not flashing, which makes me suspect that it's not firing, is it? So let's start at the beginning. Let's see if we've got a feed to our coil when I connect that together, what I was connecting together, wasn't it? So I was connecting it together and I was putting our ignition lights up, which should energise our coil, shouldn't it? So what I'm going to have to do is see if it's actually powering the coil up to begin with. So obviously nothing at the minute because I haven't got it connected up that end. So let me go and find a way of connecting that together. Right, that's us connected together. So we're seeing if it's powering the coil up. It is. So we've got a live feed up at the coil. Are our points a bit dirty? That could be, it could be as simple as that. The points are a bit dirty. Let's just get this off. See what we got. So, okay. I suspect our points might be a bit dirty. So, well, that'll be the damp, won't it? It got into it. Right, let's disconnect that ignition. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just turn the battery off and then we'll clean them up. We'll use a little bit of wet and dry paper. This is the sort of thing you do for rubbing, rubbing your paint down and so on. It could be, I think that's 800 or 1200. Anyway, we'll use that to clean the contacts up on the points. But we'll have a look at the points first to see what's happening, because they might not even be opening, mightn't they? So we don't know. We know that we've got ignition feed and so on. So what we're looking at down inside here, what I was doing when I was checking, with this, was I was opening and closing them like that. Now you have to be careful not to push them too far, otherwise you'll take this bit, which is fed live, and then push it against there and it'll arc out because it's going to earth. So you only want to move it a little bit, just like that, just to check it, and you don't want to be doing that because you're striking it to earth again. So that's what we're doing. So what we've got is what we want is them sorted out. They've probably furred up, but obviously we need a points gap there. Well, that'll be 15 thousandths of an inch. And what happens is when this rotates, it goes on the heel of here, heel of this cam, which has got 4 lobes on it, 1 for each cylinder, and that will go onto this little fibre bit and open them up. So, and the minute it's off cam, you can see there's an air gap there. So if I turn the engine over, now bear in mind I've got no electrics on, so this isn't going to suddenly fire up and do anything. Mind you, it won't fire up because you've got the top off, but you know what I mean, nothing's going to go wrong here. But as that comes round to cam there, you see that's coming up onto cam. There you go, it's open, yeah, there, and it's pushing that heel open. And if you look down in there, you'll see that's opened up. Now, I don't know if you can pull focus enough on that, but if I just point with this so you see what you're looking at between those two contacts there, opening and closing. So what I'll do is I'll hold that there so you can see what you're looking at. And as I move this round, can you see it opening, closing? Yeah, it's closing now. And it's opening. There you go, it's open. And closing again. So there you go, that's working. That's about the right gap. I'm not going to measure it with a feeler gauge. But what I'll do now is clean them up a bit. So what you've got to do is you want to clean both faces up at the same time if you can. And how we'll do that is we'll fold this in half. And what we try and do is feed this into there. Well, what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to tear this in half, actually, because we want to feed that into there. But what we don't want to do is drag a load of grease in at the same time. Now, this is quite common for points to fur up when they've sat around for a while. But the other thing that can catch you out is when you're fitting new sets of points to something, they have a little layer of sort of a grease or an anti-rust treatment on them, and you really need to clean them up. So what you use is you break a bit of the box off that they come out of, and you use that to clean them up once you've fitted them in exactly what I'm doing here. But you're not using an abrasive on it, you're using just the cardboard to clean the grease off them. And if you've got new old stock points, sometimes they've built a film up of corrosion on them and they look just dull and normal. You know, you just think, oh, it's just metal, but actually it's actually furred up and it won't work. So sometimes you have to do this on new points, but if they're new old stock, not brand new ones, but you know, ones that have been hanging around for 30 years on the shelf somewhere, or 50 years or whatever. But anyway, so what I do is I just tease them open like that, pop that in there between the two contacts, and then what I want to do is pull this up and down. But you see it's a bit tight, it won't pull, because basically it's because it's got the pressure of the point spring on them. So you might have to just open it a bit by hand just to be able to do it. There you see, so I'm doing that. You see the stuff that's coming off them? You can see. So they're obviously got a bit of corrosion on them. But yeah, as I say, sometimes you have to just open the points up slightly with you see I'm using this thumb here and my nail just to put them open to take a bit of pressure off them. Otherwise it sticks and stops, doesn't it? But just taking enough pressure off them so I can clean them up. And you do that a few times and we should get ourselves to a point where we've got a spark now. That should clean them up. Blow any dust off them. That should do it. So hopefully that will sort it out. So now we've got to find the rotor arm, which I'll put down somewhere. In fact, I'll put it in my pocket. Here we are. Right, so we pop the rotor arm on. You can see that only lines up in one place. You see it lines up with that peg in there, so you can't put that on around the wrong way. There you go, so it only goes one place. That's that. Pop our cap back on, and then we'll have another go at it. Now, for some reason, these tangs are around the wrong way. See, that one's hitting the condenser? See, someone's put these on around the wrong way. They must have taken this apart, because that should flop back there. It's not in the right place, is it? But anyway, I can make that work like that. And perhaps it'll run. But yeah, what we have to do is you look and see if that lights up. Now let me turn the battery back on, which will turn the ignition on, because I've got it hot wired across, and then let me just see what we got. I'll put it across here and see if we crank it and what happens. Let's see what we got. Shout if there's a spark. Right, so we've got a spark. I'll leave that on for now. I think it's because it's drawn no fuel up yet. So what I'll do, I'll give it another little squirt of this stuff and we'll try it again. Well, it's certainly trying to fire, isn't it? We're very nearly there, aren't we? But it ain't quite right yet. So, I don't think that's drawing any fuel up. What I'm going to do is I'll get a jam jar of fuel. I'll tip a bit of fuel down the carb, a bit of petrol. But I suspect that's not drawing any fuel up from there for some reason. The diaphragm in the fuel pump is very dry. And sometimes when it's very dry, it won't draw any fuel. Sometimes you almost have to prime it, prime the actual pump itself by filling it up with petrol. So we might try that in a minute, but just for the sake of this, I'm going to pour a little bit down the carburetor. So what I'll do is I'll just pour a bit of this into this cap and do it that way. The thing with using a jam jar is you can put the top back on it, and then you haven't got an open thing of fuel by you, have you? Which I think is a good thing. And if I get that down there and pour that down the carb, I'll pop this back into there just in case it fires up and wants to try and draw some fuel up. Let's give that another go. Okay, perhaps we've got wet plugs. Let's get the plug out and see if we've wetted the plugs up. We could quite easily have wetted the plugs up now. In which case, it ain't going to fire, is it? So I've turned the battery off. Let's pop the plug out, see what we got. All this mucking around, we might have wetted the plugs up. Now they look dry. They look dry, that's all right. Yeah, you see that one's wet. You see how wet that is? So that's what's happened. We've wetted the plugs up. So let's get them out, get them dry, and we'll start again, I think. Rather than drying them out, mucking about, I'll just put a new set in. So I should have some of these in stock. Yeah, so we've wetted them all up. So what we got in here? We got a B7HS. What I've got is a B6HS. So let's just see, it's going to do the same job. Now I use a 6 instead of a 7 anyway, so maybe it won't be why it didn't start, but it's going to be better for it. Now I'm not going to gap the electrodes on them because we just want to get this running and you don't want to muck about. But obviously if they're going to stay in there, we'll gap them. But I suspect it won't be the last time the plugs are out in this session. Now obviously you want to be careful not to cross-thread anything because it's an aluminium cylinder head. So you want to be careful doing these, and you see they've gone in nice and finger tight here. You know, they're going all the way in without any leverage needing to be put on them, which is how it should be. And then we'll just nip them up with the plug spanner at the end. Oh, I don't need to over tighten them. Right, should we do our trick on these and check which one's which, just to make sure we haven't got anything silly going on here. So we know that's the king lead, and so we've got 1, 3, 4, 2. So under here, that's 2, under here is 4. So if we just take that off and get our continuity tester and just check that. So we're checking number 4 because we know it's the far end. So again, we're using the tester, aren't we? So we're going this end of the plug lead, and then we're looking for the digits to move here, aren't we? Well, number 4. There you go. That's 4, isn't it? That's it. You see. So that's that one. So we'll plug that in there on number 4, and just to prove what we were on about, we'll use that continuity tester on number 3. See, it's doing nothing. See, so we know that. So we're all right there, aren't we? So pop that on there, pop that back in there. we should get some fuel into our fuel pump. So I think the quickest thing to do here is take the top of the fuel pump off and just fill it with some petrol. But I think if we do this, we might stand a bit of a better chance of drawing some up if we pop the top of this off very quickly. Okay. Right, there's a little strainer in there, and we can see we've got no fuel here at all, have we yet? There's no, I mean, it's a bit of residual, but nothing really. It might even be a bit of water, you don't know, do you? That's the other thing, if we've got a carburettor full of water. I don't think we have, but who knows. Let's just clean that out. It might be that with this filled up, it might want to actually draw and pull some fuel up. Okay. It might not, might still struggle, but it's got a bit of chance, doesn't it? More chance than no chance, which is what I think it had before. Okay, one more little go. Well, it's nearly there, but it doesn't just like it, does it? I think we're struggling because we haven't got any fuel in this carburettor. I think it's not filling it up properly. Let's have a see if we can get that sorted out. Right, it's pretty dry in there. I'll get that out with a rag, whatever that is, and then we'll actually fill it with fuel, with petrol, and see what we got. I think it's probably the best thing to do. Let's actually fill that up, and then we'll pop the top of the carb back on, and we'll have another go. Let's see what we got. That might help. Might not. Might still be more mucking about. But let's start like that and see what we got. Now what I will do, I'll just check that this the needle valve's working. So I'll just take this off. It's broken that gasket unfortunately, but we can soon get a gasket for it. That won't be a problem. I should have one in stock really, but I don't know if I have or not. Right, let's get that off there. Now, I'll just blow through here. Now, this has got a needle valve on it, so you got this is the float. So when the petrol goes up, it goes up and then it goes onto this little piece here, and it will shut the needle valve. Now, if it's free, when I blow through it, it will blow through there, and then it should shut when I push it shut. Yeah, so that's working. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's just pop this in. Now, I mean, it'd be nice to clean this carburettor out and clean all the jets out and so on, but that might be something that we do a bit further down the line. Right now, I just want to, you know, we're trying to get this thing to run, aren't we? For the purposes of a film. Right, let's try that. See if we get anywhere now. Well, that's good. Right. Well, that ran, sounded nice, but it stopped. Now, why did it stop? It probably stopped because we're not drawing any fuel up, are we? I suspect we didn't draw any fuel up. And it emptied the carburettor and then it hasn't drawn any more up. But that's just, I'll crank it over again quickly and see what we got. See if it does want to fire again. No, you see, I don't think it likes it. Let's see. That's drawn fuel up, isn't it? That's it. So it must have drawn the fuel up and now it's running on it. You see our sparks? So we've got this, you know, that's just showing this sparking. We won't run it without on. But that's it, isn't it? Oh, that killed it. Just try again. Right, well that ran for a bit. Just feeling that it had a bit of back pressure on the exhaust and then it died. Now I don't think that's what caused it to die. I think it's not drawing fuel up. So the quickest way of checking that is to take it off the top again, isn't it? And see if we've got any fuel in the carb. And let's see what we got. Now if your fuel pump's working on your carb, which is your accelerator pump, which is the bit, you know, you have a little diaphragm on the side of the carburettor, you can try just operating the carburettor and seeing if it's squirting any in. That's one way of telling. But I'm not, you know, I want to know for sure that whether we got anything. Look, there's nothing there that's not drawing any fuel up. So I suspect we've emptied the carburettor again. Well, yeah, it's not drawing the fuel up, is it? You know, for some reason. We don't know why it's not drawing up at the minute. That's what we don't know about. But it sounds healthy, didn't it? It sounded nice. I mean, what you didn't see was that under cranking, the oil pressure light had already gone out. So we'd already got oil pressure up before we even ran the engine. So, you know, I sort of knew that, so that's good. So that bodes well for a healthy engine that on cranking you can, you know, extinguish the oil pressure light. So I think this is a nice little engine. Now, I think we've got a good engine here, which, you know, I think it's a good little car, to be honest. I think it's a nice one. Yeah, look, dry again. You know, there's a bit in the bottom, isn't it? But, you know, it's emptied it. So what's happened? It's emptied the carburettor. Running it like that, it's emptied the carburettor. It's not drawing any fuel up. Now, either that hose isn't sticking down into the fuel because that can's not full, you know, and it's sort of not actually drawing the fuel, or, you know, something else is going. Right, so we're running again. Let's see if it'll draw anything out of there. That's all right, isn't it? So it's obviously drawing fuel out of there. So I think what was happening, that tube was going in the bottom of my jerry can and not staying in the petrol. So it's all working, it's all nice. So I reckon we clean the tank out and I think it'll all work. So we'll just turn her off. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So that's good, isn't it? I reckon that's a success. So we're trying to work out what's sort of gone on with it, what's happened to it. Now, it's a particularly good example, I think. You know, it doesn't look to have had too much nasty welding on it. But we can't find out much sort of information on it. But it's a sweet one. But yeah, we'll have a look at a couple of little details on it and see. So this is an earlier car, so this is aluminium rather than plastic. So these are aluminium rather than plastic. It has the big sort of handle on it rather than the push button one. The doors, suicide doors. They flap out round the back way. They wouldn't normally open that far. That's because the check strap's gone on it. So that's that. So yeah, no interior at the minute because we took it all out because it was all damaged and horrible. And as I said, no ignition switch, but there we go. That's what I just jerry-rigged up, wasn't it? This thing, wasn't it? So there you go. So that turns ignition on. The minute, you see the lights come up. And then if I put that across there, it might just start again. You never know. There you go. And that's that. No horn. Right. There you go. Right, that's that. I'll turn the battery off. So, you know, all the sort of spot welds are here where they should be. You know, this sort of thing. I've seen it on the wheel arches as well. It's got all those spot welds. It's a nice one, this. I think it's a good one. The sills haven't been replaced. They seem to be original. They have original spot welds in it. So I think it's come from down the south, I reckon. And I'll tell you what backs that up. What makes me think this has come from the south is this. Now that's Padre Pio. He's a Sicilian saint, and they love him down there. He's you know, it's a big thing. So I reckon this has been in Sicily or down the bottom of Italy. And that's backed up with the fact that the interior, the cloth has all sort of disintegrated and fallen apart. Now it's got damp. Well, of course, the sun would have got to it. So it's got no rust in the car until it got to England and got flooded. And I'd say that interior, I reckon the sun damaged it originally and made it all thin and horrible. And then, of course, when it got the damp in it, it wrecked it. So that's my theory. And then we've got Pope John Paul here as well. So it would have been, yeah, there we are. So Pope John Paul, Pope Batoy, the Polish Pope. Now, a funny thing today was on the radio, they had the Last Word programme, which is a sort of, you know, obituary programme talking about people and their lives and so on. And of course, they've been talking about Jeff Beck, which I spoke about last week. But they're also talking about Tom Carron. Now, Tom Carron was a major product designer, involved in the motor industry, ogle design. So he was involved in the sort of design of the first scimitar and things like that. But he's famous really for the Rally Chopper. So he designed the Rally Chopper, but they said on there, oh, he did the Pope-mobile. So John Paul, the Pope's Pope-mobile, he designed that. So when he came to England, to the UK, which we sort of all euphemistically called it the Pope-mobile because we were kids, and you know, that was it. Yeah, he designed that. I didn't realise that. And they also talked about the land speeder, Luke Skywalker's chariot from from the Star Wars film, first Star Wars film. And I thought Auger Design designed that. They didn't. They built it. But they built it on a Reliant chassis, on a Reliant three-wheeler. And of course, again, Tom Carron was the Reliant Robin and the Bond Bug, you know. And of course, I started off my working life working on these silly little cars, on scimitars and the three-wheeled Reliants and Mitsubishis as well. But that's where I did my apprenticeship on them. So it makes me laugh, really. So yeah, if you need your kingpin done on Luke Skywalker needs his kingpin done on his land speeder, I know exactly how to do that. And yeah, it begs the question: was it a Reliant Robin chassis, a Bond Bug chassis, or a Peckham Supervan chassis? Although I think Star Wars came out before Rod and Del Boy had their Supervan, but you never know. Bit of cross pollination there. Yeah. So yeah. Del and Rodney in the you know Luke Skywalker's land speeder, and Pope Batoy on a chopper rally chopper bike. You know, it's a bit irreverent, but why not? I'm sure they'd laugh about it. And talk about irreverent. There's a wonderful picture of Padre Pio that I showed to my mate. He's in a little allotment, and this little kid's running up behind him, and he looks like he's just ready to kick him up the arse. just like Bishop Brennan in Father Ted. Anyway, there you go. I might be having to say a few Hail Marys and take some sort of absolution for my irreverence. But anyway, you don't get to grow up Catholic without a bit of a reverence, do you? Anyway, there you are. So yeah, it runs. That's lovely, isn't it? Bit of fun. Yeah, I love these little things. They're darling, aren't they? But this is this one wasn't from Florence, was it? We don't think. We think from Sicily. Whereas my one's from Florence. And there we are. But yeah, they're darling, aren't they? They do make me laugh. Right. With that nonsense out the way, look up Tom Caron, because it's quite funny to see the stuff he did, because he's the marble run as well. That's another thing he did. But yeah, I think it's quite amazing. And another stupid little fact is someone I know has got the whole collection of Style Auto that used to belong to Ogle Design. Now, Style Autos, that book, that little magazine about design, Italian design that we were looking at in one of the Dino videos that time. But he's got a whole collection, and it's all from Ogle Design, which is, I think that's quite a cool thing. I'm a bit jealous of that. Jealous of having a full set, let alone having the Ogle Design one. But there you are. On that silly note, I'll say goodnight.